In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to paint fir trees in oils using the underpainting technique. Hi, I'm Marion Dutton. Welcome to Maz Art Studio. Have you ever struggled painting trees using the wet on wet approach? Well, if so, this video is for you. Many beginners in particular find that when they're trying to paint trees using the alla prima approach, which is the wet on wet approach, they end up with mud. Layering oil on top of wet oil can be very difficult, especially for beginners. And when you're painting trees, you need to start with that dark first, and then you begin to add your midtones and your highlights on top. And this can often result in a very muddy mess. In the demonstration coming up next, we're going to be doing two studies, one of a summer fir tree and one of a winter fir tree with lots of thick snow on top of a dried underpainting. So let's jump to that tutorial. Okay, I'm beginning with my wash of burnt umber. And I cover all of the processes of an underpainting in this video here. So if this is the first time you have seen this, do check this video out. But today's lesson really is about actually how to paint the trees and not about the underpainting. So we're going to speed through the underpainting session, but don't worry, I will be running normal time when we get to the colour layers. So I'm creating two trees, two little studies. One we're going to do as a summertime tree and the other one we're going to do with some snow in the winter. I'm using oil paints for this underpainting, but you could do it with acrylic. Here I'm using an eraser just so I can get some depth within my underpainting. And again, if you haven't seen this technique before, do check out my other video and also look at the hidden pond tutorial where I do a full landscape using this underpainting technique. And once you're happy with your underpainting, you want to let that completely dry, and then we will move on to do the colour layers. Okay, my underpainting is completely dry now, and we're going to begin working on these two studies of the tree. And we're going to do one in the summer and we're going to do one in the winter time. First thing I'm going to do is put a very thin oil layer over the whole of my painting. If you were working on a large canvas, you'd be able to just oil out the relevant area that you were working on. But because we're doing these small studies, I'm going to oil out the whole area. And what this does is just enables me to keep the paint very, very thin. When you're working with an underpainting, you apply the paint layers nice and thin until you come to the highlights, where you start to add the thicker highlights. Once you've got that medium on there, this is an oil painting medium, I'm going to take a paper towel and just wipe off that excess so there is a very thin amount. I'm going to begin initially working on the sky, and we'll mix a nice blue colour using some white and some ultramarine blue. I'm going to add just a tiny amount of burnt umber in there just to grey the colour down a little bit, make it look a little more natural. I'm using a nice flat brush. I'm going to just put a little bit of a sky area on. These little studies are really worth doing. And again, you can see I'm applying that paint nice and thin. It is much better to work in very thin layers, at least until you come to those highlights. And you'll notice I'm just going slightly over the underpainting. We want that sky to look as though it's behind the tree. I'll darken that colour slightly as we go further up the canvas. We'll have it a little bit darker. And just for a little extra interest, let's throw a few soft clouds in there. I'm using my finger just to add these in. Working on the grass now, I'm going to begin with a little sap green and a little black for a nice dark green. We'll get a little shadow in here And again, that's going on very, very thinly. We're really just tinting that underpainting. Let's warm that grass now with a little yellow ochre. A little bit of that mixing white. Okay, moving back to our dark green. I'm using a little viridian this time. You can also use sap green as well. And this time with some black. A really lovely dark green. And we're going to focus initially on where we can see our darks. Keeping this very, very loose. Again, remember that we are just tinting. I'm using a small flat brush, but you could use a fan brush as well. I'm going to stay with that dark colour and just come out of the image and just start getting some very loose outer edges. And I'm switching to a fan brush to do this. So we're switching back now to a mid-tone green, which is the sap green with a little yellow ochre and some of that white. So I'm not going over where I can see those darks, I'm kind of just painting around those now. And again, taking a little bit of that over the sky. So we've got our darks on there and our mid-tones. We now need a highlight. A little more yellow, a little more cadmium yellow, and a little more of the white for a much paler green and a warmer colour. The highlights go on much thicker. We'll have the sun coming over from the left-hand side. Remember to slide that brush and get that real thick highlight right on the edge of your brush. A very light tapping. Now you notice I've not just highlighted that one edge, we have gone over into the middle and slightly over on the other side. And this side we want a little bit more of a cooler colour. So taking that colour, I'm going to just pick up some of that sky tone, a little bit of blue and some white to highlight the other side, but using a slightly cooler tone. These are not our final highlights yet. Finally, for the final highlights, I'm switching to a small flat, a little more white and a little more yellow for a really final bright highlight. And again, really slide that brush to get a ridge of paint. Be quite selective now where you pop these final highlights. And we'll repeat over on the other side with a slightly lighter and cooler reflective light. So we'll do the same with the sky over on the other side. Add a little oil medium and then add the sky. I've added a little touch of purple into this mixture for the sky, just for a little variety. Bring that colour into the snow and add a slightly darker purple shadow right underneath the tree. Let's mix some black with some purple. And once again begin tinting, using that underpainting as a map, we'll begin tinting those darker tones. So all of that work is done in those underpainting stages. Take a little bit of a darker shadow under the tree as well. And again, I'll use a little of that dark to come out into the sky. This time I'm using the flat brush. So again, you can see the different looks with the different brushes that you can get. Before I begin adding the snow, I'm going to add some nice dark green. So I'm going to use a little bit of the Viridian green and some black and just a little yellow ochre, just to lighten it slightly. We still want a really nice dark green, and I'm going to use this for my mid-tone, just to hint at some of the darker green underneath. I'm putting this paint on very, very thin so that we're able to add thicker highlights with the snow. So for our snow, we're going to have the light coming over from the left hand side again. I'm going to mix a warm white using some titanium white and a little yellow ochre, very small amount of yellow ochre, for a nice warm white. We'll use this for our highlight colour. Once again, sliding that brush to get a really nice thick ridge. And you want to imagine the snow sitting on those branches. Keep wiping that brush regularly and reloading to keep that paint nice and fresh. Don't forget these branches that will be in the middle. Don't just outline the outer edges. There will be some branches coming towards you. For the other side, we'll use a cool white. So I'm going into titanium white and a little bit of purple. And again, don't just outline one side, do dance a little bit of this colour over into the middle. For our final highlights, we'll just use pure white, really put it on nice and thick. Very, very light pressure as you're applying this very thick paint, and again being a little bit more selective where you want this final highlight. Bring a little snow in front. And here we'll just pop a few little grasses. Finally, if you want to add a little snow, we can use a little medium and some white, and just to thin down the paint slightly. And then your aim is to just pull the bristles back on your brush to create a little splattering effect. And you can always add a few larger snow drops. And I think that concludes our tree studies. I really do hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and you'll have a go at this for yourself. Now do check out my free tutorial, The Hidden Pond, where you'll be able to see the underpainting technique on a full landscape rather than just on studies. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and let me know in the comments below if you are getting value from these lessons. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you again in the next video.